Joining us now is United States Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican of Arkansas. He serves on, among others, the Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee. He's author of the book Only the Strong. Senator, welcome back to the show.
Hey, guys. Good to be back on with you.
Well, turbulent times around the world. This weekend was a very significant development with this unprecedented direct attack by Iran on the state of Israel and all the lead up to it and then the fallout beyond. We've gotten various perspectives on the show already today. I want to give you the floor and get your big takeaways.
Well, guys, first off, I want to commend the skill and bravery of our troops and the Israeli troops, pilots, flight crews, and those of other nations who pitched in as well to pitch a near perfect game against more than 300 drones and missiles that Iran shot at Israel. Thankfully, Israel was able to survive that with only minimal casualties. I wouldn't presume, Guy, to tell Israel what it should do, whether it's Prime Minister Netanyahu or the war cabinet or the elected government. They're a Democratic ally. They've got to take the actions that they deem necessary to protect themselves and to make sure that Iran is scared straight and never does such a thing again without understanding they will pay a severe price. Now, I find it hard to believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu or most normal Israelis will take Joe Biden's advice, which was supposedly take the win, as if it's a win when a radical theocratic tyranny shoots over 300 missiles and drones at your country. They have exquisite air defenses that are designed to protect their people. They're not designed to protect the Ayatollahs from the consequences of their reckless actions. And frankly, I think it's foolhardy that Joe Biden is even going out there and leaking the news of that advice to the media, because all it does is, again, embolden Iran to think that they can get away with this kind of thing in the future, which is exactly what Joe Biden has done since he took office by turning the other cheek on Iran's attacks against American troops and our interests. For example, in the Red Sea, an outlaw gang of brigands and rebels in Yemen, which is funded and equipped by Iran, keeps shooting at U.S. Navy vessels. And all we do is shoot those missiles or drones out of the sky or shoot them on the launching pad. We never get on offense to actually destroy their capability to shoot at our sailors who are sitting ducks there. Now, Joe Biden says he wants a diplomatic solution. He doesn't want a military solution. Sometimes, though, you have to have at least some military component to your solution. Again, that's up to Israel to decide. But if he really wants a diplomatic solution, I've got a few recommendations for him. First, he should immediately revoke the sanctions waiver to the tune of $10 billion that he just again gave to Iran a few weeks ago. Second, he should demand that European partners in the ill-fated nuclear deal with Iran impose so-called snapback sanctions that Barack Obama waived on Iran. And three, he should enforce our nation's own sanctions on Iran's illicit oil shipments, which are now over a million barrels a day, and going mostly to China. So if he wants a diplomatic solution, there are at least some things he can do. But if past is any prologue, he's going to do basically nothing to try to deter Iran or to punish it for these reckless attacks on Israel.
All right, so there's a couple things to unpack there. You just ran through three concrete diplomatic steps, short of hard power, that Biden could undertake, involving ourselves directly and our allies to really sort of resume maximum pressure on Iran, which was Trump's policy. Biden, of course, got rid of it very foolishly. You hinted at it in your point, but what is the likelihood that Biden does even one, let alone all three of those things, given his whole worldview? It seems like there's this weird fixation with Iran, not deterring them, not forcing them to abandon their nuclear program, but to kind of cozy up to them in some ways and reward them and cajole them with a lot of carrots and not many sticks.
Yeah, God, that's not just Joe Biden's policy. It's been the Democratic Party's policy going back now 15 years since Barack Obama took office, that Iran was somehow mistreated or wronged by America over the years, and we were to blame for the tensions with Iran, and we were to blame for Iran's attacks on America and our allies. That's simply been the policy all along, and it hasn't changed a bit since the October 7th attack. So why do we think it would change now? And I don't think he's going to take any of these actions. In part, you already have administration officials anonymously talking to the media this morning saying they're not going to revoke the sanctions waiver on those $10 billion of payment flows. Or think about shutting off the flow of oil out of Iran. Why are they not doing that? It's because Joe Biden is conducting foreign policy based on the Electoral College. He's worried that oil prices would go up and therefore gasoline prices in America if you didn't have that extra 1.5 million barrels of oil a day from Iran. How do we know that? His own Secretary of Defense, under my questioning last week at the Armed Services Committee, acknowledged that the administration has urged Ukraine not to hit Russian oil refineries, which would be one of the best ways to slow down Russia's onslaught in Ukraine. And he acknowledged that one reason for that is that they don't want to see the price of gasoline go up. It's the same thing he's doing with Israel's war in Gaza against Hamas, catering to a few towns in an electoral college critical state like Michigan. So, no, I don't think he's going to take these actions because, again, he's putting his own electoral interests ahead of the American interests.
Yeah, and handcuffing our allies, telling them what they're supposed to do and certainly not do in a number of cases. But these are all at cross purposes, right? This is an incoherent policy because if he's basically admitting, and his team are admitting, they're not going to take these tough but necessary diplomatic steps to really hurt Iran in response to this, that only increases the likelihood that Israel will respond militarily, because Israel will see that while we certainly helped them to great effect over the weekend, which is fantastic, I'm glad that we did, ultimately it's going to be up to them to defend themselves and to deter Iran and to show that they mean business, because America is at best a wishy-washy, unreliable ally right now for various reasons. So Biden is saying we're probably not going to do these diplomatic things, but also Israel, you shouldn't respond militarily to the attack against your country, having told Iran not to attack Israel, which they did anyway. And there's reports, I don't know if you saw them, Reuters had this report, Senator, that the administration back-channeled through Turkey somewhat green-lighting a limited attack by Iran against Israel. I don't know if what happened on Saturday counts as limited in Biden's mind, but it just feels like this is a muddled mess, none of which makes any sense.
Well, that's typical of Joe Biden's thinking generally, and especially Joe Biden's foreign policy. I mean, you put your finger on one of the key words, which is defense. Yes, we helped Israel, along with some of our other allies and partners in the region, defend against this unprecedented assault from Iran, just like we've helped Ukraine at times defend against Russia's unprovoked war of aggression. But as soon as either nation talks about getting on offense, talks about destroying capabilities inside of Iran or inside Russia that are being used to make war against them, then Joe Biden immediately acts like an elephant who's seen a mouse and jumps up on the table. And all he does is embolden those adversaries to be even more aggressive because they see that fear, just like that band of outlaws in Yemen sees the fear that the United States has against striking them, that all we'll do is leave our sailors as sitting ducks, cowering and crouching in a fetal position, only willing to use our military might to defend against missiles and drones that are in the air on the launch pad, as opposed to blowing them all to smithereens along with the leaders of that band of outlaws. This is exactly what our adversaries see. Frankly, it's what China sees as well, and it probably has China licking its chops at the prospect of taking Taiwan against President Biden as well.
Another alarming prospect. Senator Tom Cotton, please stand by. We'll take a quick break. We'll continue this conversation right after this.
A fresh perspective on the topics of the day. It's Guy Benson.
Elsewhere, a family is camping under the one star visible from their backyard. Oh, wait, that's a streetlight. In North Carolina, real adventures await. For real, visit NC.
We're back. Senator Tom Cotton, our guest on the Guy Benson Show. Senator, I do want to ask you, because you were talking about some of these narrow constituencies and certain voters that the president and his team seem obsessed with winning, or at least placating, or winning them back over because they've been very angry with him over Gaza. They are basically on the side of Hamas in this war against Israel. And so he's trying to have it both ways all the time and really impressing no one in the process. Just recently, we played it on the show, there were the chants of death to America in the streets of Dearborn, Michigan. And that's, of course, one of these communities that Biden is concerned about for his electoral prospects. Then this past weekend, we saw chants of death to America being literally taught to left-wing activists in Chicago as they prepare to disrupt the Democrats' convention in that city in August. You had a gentleman who was teaching mostly white activists how to chant in Farsi, death to Israel, death to America. You had a whole room filled with these people doing that, this unholy alliance I keep talking about between Islamists and basically communists. I know you're a senator and you look at a lot of things through that lens, as you should, but you're also a veteran. You put on the uniform, you went to places far away from home in a very dangerous part of the world to defend us. I just wonder, when you see death to America being chanted not over there, but over here, openly, how you react to that?
Well, it reflects a deep cancer that has set in through certain key institutions in American society, K through 12 education in too many cases, and certainly higher education, but also the Democratic Party. This is the chickens coming home to roost of years, if not decades, of the American left teaching noxious doctrines of intersectionality and so forth. That ends up turning on its head, basic morality of normal Americans. That when you look at a country like Israel, you don't see, what do they call them, white colonial oppressors, but rather a Jewish nation that has finally provided the Jewish people with its own state to defend its people and its traditions after 2,000 years. Or you look at America and see the most flawed nation in the world, as opposed to the most noble nation in the world that has constantly striven to uphold our founding ideals and to help other nations achieve their aspirations as well. Again, it's not surprising that you have a generation of kids who have grown up to be these radical left-wing activists or anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas demonstrators, but it is very troubling for our nation. Fortunately, it's not the way most people think, and I think it's going to hurt the Democratic Party badly this fall. That's one of the reasons why Joe Biden has engaged in so many of these seemingly contradictory policies as he tries to dance between this very vocal and influential minority in his own party and the common sense of the vast majority of Americans at large.
Yeah, they're very loud, that group, and they extract a lot of political pain, and they're very good at sort of having outsized influence within that coalition and within that tribe. What worries me is, even though they're still a fringe, the louder they get and the more they are able to tug the party in that direction and the president. And you need leadership to stand up against it if you're going to stop it and defeat it. Biden is doing the opposite of leading. He's following that group and just trying to straddle the fence, and therefore you're seeing in the polling more people are then saying, okay, maybe this is a legitimate thing. Maybe we should move further in this direction, and the problem is getting worse. It's metastasizing, and I'm very concerned about that for the future. Somewhat relatedly, Senator, there's now a fight in the House about this supplemental spending bill with implications for Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan and beyond. What do you think is going to happen in the House? What do you think needs to happen for the country?
Well, Guy, I don't want to play floor manager for Mike Johnson. I know Speaker Johnson wants to get Israel urgently the aid it needs, along with Ukraine, and also help protect our own southern border. How he does that is not as important as me as that we get it done. I think there's some things he suggested that might be able to thread the needle, like, for instance, turning the aid or some of the aid for Ukraine into a loan as to an outright grant, or passing the law that would allow the United States and therefore encourage European nations to seize Russian assets that are held in our nations, and therefore be able to use that to fund Ukraine in its defense against Russia's unprovoked war of aggression. But I don't want to try to tell Speaker Johnson how he needs to get that done. He understands where the House votes are and how he can proceed. I just think that we certainly need to get immediately Israel the aid it needs, and without much more delay, Ukraine as well the aid it needs.
Do you think it's possible that it could be standalone, like just Israel funding? Because it sounds like there are certain Republicans and a lot of Democrats, including the White House, saying they wouldn't accept that.
Well, that would certainly be a very hard vote for a lot of the Democrats in the House of Representatives if they wanted to vote against aid to Israel. Now, they got 250 votes last month for a bill to aid Israel. Just a handful of Republicans voted no out of fiscal concerns that didn't have spending offsets. I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 Democrats voted for it because they generally do want to support Israel's military at this time of urgent need. But if they bring it up again to the floor after what happened this weekend, I'd be very interested to see how the Democratic Party votes.
Finally, Senator Cotton, there's this Mayorkas impeachment scenario where he has been impeached, the DHS secretary, by the House. And tomorrow the report is that will move over to the Senate. There are various options for Senate leadership. Of course, the Democrats control the Senate. What do you expect to see there? Do you believe that there should be a full trial?
Well, what I think Chuck Schumer is going to try to do is table or dismiss these charges, which is unprecedented in American history, and it would be a total abdication of the Senate's responsibility because he doesn't want his vulnerable Democrats like John Tester from Montana and Sherrod Brown from Ohio having to sit through a trial that presents the evidence of Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas' negligence at the border to the American people. So I expect after maybe a lot of debate and the potential efforts by Republicans to bring up some points of order or other motions that Chuck Schumer will bring it up for a vote. And then the American people, especially the voters in places like Montana and Ohio, will see if their senators take their responsibility seriously. Again, this is just a procedural vote, too. It's not saying that you'd vote to convict. It's not even saying that you'd tie up the Senate floor in a weeks-long trial when we have other important business to do. It's also an option when you're not dealing with a presidential impeachment to stand up a committee of impeachment that hears the evidence and makes a recommendation to the Senate. So the only reason Chuck Schumer is doing this is because he wants to try to protect his vulnerable Democratic incumbents, but there'll be no protection for them once they cast the vote to give the back of the hand to charges about the serious abuses of this administration at the border.
Yeah, a recurring theme here. Politics, politics, politics. Domestic policy, foreign policy, coming back to politics on the Democratic side. U.S. Senator Tom Cotton, Republican Arkansas, our guest here on the Guy Benson Show. Senator, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Guy.